streets, so the streets will have sidewalk on one side and trail on the other. We've included a condition that the sidewalks that are in the building need to extend out to those public street connections. On one side, it'll connect to a trail, and then the other side to the sidewalk. But it's important that people be able to walk from the building out to the street. With the berms, there's going to be a little wiggling through there because those are some pretty big berms. You can't just cut through that, but I think they'll be able to get through there. The 2 new public streets will be constructed by the applicant with the project. Both streets comply with county spacing guidelines. Natalie mentioned earlier that the county is in transition. We did not receive a formal review from the county on this, but they will have to issue the permits for the project. As part of the EAW, we did a feasibility study that did require turn lanes on that new north access. As part of Nelson, if you recall, they did build a turn lane at that southern access already. The southern street is the collector street, intended ultimately to be the larger connection. The northern street, though, will have a similar design, and that will ultimately connect with a future street in Maple Grove. There is on that north street, there is a large retaining wall. So that north street sort of butts up against that large wetland I pointed out at the beginning. And so in order to build up the road to the 101 outside of the floodplain and wetland, there's a large retaining wall, about 15 feet at its highest point. So when you're driving south down 101, as you look towards that street, you'll see a fairly large wall. And so we've included a condition that a large wall has 2 components. One, there's a design component, so we'll be looking at that as we drive into Corcoran. So we want to make sure it's an attractive wall, so it's sort of a decorative design. And I think if you drive around the metro, you see, things that look like your backyard retaining wall on the Holiday on Highway 55, and then some nicer sort of designs. So we'll work with them on the design. Additionally, there are utilities in that street, and so depending on how the retaining wall is designed, it could have an impact on those utilities. So we need to make sure that they're choosing a wall design that both now and in the future protects our city utilities. The developer is responsible, I mentioned a couple of them, but the developer is responsible for all of the improvements identified in that feasibility study in EAW. I think I hit the high points on it, but there are some other things that are included in that study. Next slide. Again, this is in the MUSA, so it's served by city sanitary sewer and water. To anticipate future needs, we have a potential future well site identified on this property, and the applicant has shown that as Outlot B, sort of in the northwest corner of the property. The final location and an access route to that outlot, because it's sort of an island outlot, if you saw that on the plans, need to be determined. Stormwater, as I think the commission knows, is always significant design issue. We are still working through that with them to finalize that, but we do have stormwater ponds shown on the plans. The FEMA floodplain elevation in this north part of the metro with Corcoran, Rogers, Dayton, and Maple Grove has been something of a challenge. And so as part of this project, all 4 cities came together with Elm Creek Watershed to request that the watershed do a floodplain study. They did do that and establish a floodplain for this area. The applicant's plans are consistent with that new floodplain elevation that was recently established. There is some floodplain fill proposed, and so that will need to be mitigated in accordance with state rules. That's a very common part of development. So that's just a permit that will need to happen. That's included as a condition in the engineer's memo. The wetlands, the southern wetland, the southwest corner wetland is a DNR wetland. We talked about that with Nelson, for those of you who were around when Nelson came through. No impacts there, but there are some minor impacts throughout the site. There are a number of wetlands, and so the wetland mitigation is subject to the city watershed TEP review. Usually that's by purchasing credits. That's what they'll do. They'll fill that and purchase credits, so they'll have to get that mitigation plan approved. Next slide. The Northeast District, again, has additional standards beyond the rest of the city, and one of those standards is that applicants provide resiliency components. You need to provide a minimum of 3 options outlined in that Northeast District standard, and they are choosing as their 3 landscaping with native species, bioretention systems, which are the stormwater ponds. I note with this that, again, because that's not approved yet, that bioretention system assumes infiltration, and you all live in Corcoran, so you know we have topsoils. So if that doesn't work, they will need to find a 3rd option, but that is something that'll work through with that stormwater approval that I know they're working on as we speak. And their 3rd option is the electric vehicle charging stations. 6 stations are provided, split between the 2 buildings. So I think that's an exciting addition to the city. Next slide. So that was the site plan. The second application is the preliminary plat for 2 lots and 5 outlots, one of which is, as I mentioned, the city well site. As part of this project, 6.5 acres of the 80-acre site are being deeded for local and county streets. And the project would be developed in 2 phases. Initially anticipated lot 1, which is the eastern lot, would be developed first with a completion in 2026, and lot 2 the following year with a completion in 2027, dependent on market conditions. Next slide. Again, the site is 2 buildings, truck court in the middle, screened. Next slide. Madam Chair and Commissioner, staff finds that the applicant does comply with the preliminary plat and site plan conditions in the ordinance. And again, we recommend approval of the draft resolution approving the preliminary plat and site plan following opening the public hearing and taking public testimony. So again, quick summary of a very long report. Happy to answer any questions before the public hearing if you'd like, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Kendra. Does anyone have any specific questions that they want to address right now before we have the public hearing?
I have a whole bunch of them, but normally,
Yeah, typically we do it after, but if, okay.
why don't we wait till after?
Okay, sounds good. All right, so then at this point in time, we will go ahead and open the public hearing for the Brockton Business Park preliminary plat and site plan, and I will defer to staff to see if there are any comment cards.
Madam Chair, we have no comment cards for 6B.
Okay, thank you so much. But at this point in time, if there's anyone here with us in person who would like to speak or make comment on this issue, just a reminder that you can come up to the podium, state your name and address for the record, limit yourself to about 5 minutes, and then just be prepared to make comments. If you have specific questions, we'll wait until the public hearing is closed to address those questions, because it's just not really a back and forth discussion. Is there anyone who would like to make public comment on the Brockton Business Park?
My name is Jim Ho. I am part owner of the K-Way Campground, which is to the southeast of the development that you're talking about. One of the things that I'm concerned about is the traffic. Since we're now in a industrial park setting, we're having 2 warehouses. More concerned about truck traffic. If I understood correctly, the road that's by Nelson International is going to become more of the major entry point to this facility. Is that correct? Yes. So when Nelson International came up, one of our main concerns is the trucks coming in and out of their facility, and at the bare minimum, the city council implemented, at least I believe they implemented, a no jake braking policy for trucks coming from the north or the south, just for the better enjoyment of their campers during the summer season. And ideally, we'd like to see the traffic, the main entry point, move to the northern part of the development. Understandably, they're going to come in one side and they're probably going to go out the other side. I mean, so we're just trying to minimize the noise issue for the better enjoyment of the campers in the summer. Understandably, the roads are going to connect into Maple Grove, and we've seen plans for the development of the area around and connecting in there. One of our other concerns is the road coming, connecting Nelson into this is going to potentially connect in to a road that may come across the northern section of our campground, which will ultimately make about 20 of our sites unusable just because of the traffic noise. Understandably, that's not a impact that you can have, but it's something of concern to us in the direction of where the road comes and connects into 101 near the Nelson International business. And those are the, and I do appreciate your concerns that you've expressed throughout the night about light pollution. I don't know what the accountability is. Nelson International has been a great business, a great neighbor for us. They've abided by the rules. The only thing that I would suggest is to make sure that the berms are actually put in place and that the trees that are supposed to diminish light pollution are actually substantial enough to do that. I can still see over across the street into the Nelson International's garages, and I'm still waiting on the trees to actually be large enough to diminish a vast majority of the light. Now, granted, they are living up to their part of the deal, so in terms of shutting the doors and limiting their business at 9 o'clock, but I just want to say that I appreciate that you're concerned in these developments in regards to light pollution. So, all right. And again, for the record, Nelson International is a great neighbor, and we do appreciate them. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Just a reminder to state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Teresa Prescott. My address is 10660 Grafton Lane. I am directly across the street from where this is developing. I am the only house right there for now. Last week, the City of Maple Grove approved 230 plus houses to go on my side, behind me, and around. That doesn't include my immediate land that will be developed future with, I believe, Pulte Homes will be developing in the next couple of years over there. So I have light concerns, light pollution concerns, not only for me, because my house is right there, sound, and for the incoming Maple Grove community that will be developing their houses there in the next few years. Guess I'd rather see a quick trip in my front yard than this, to be quite honest. But yeah, I'd like to see some light pollution kept to minimum. I don't know if the lights will be on 24 hours, will it be turned off after hours or be kept on all the time? But yeah, those are my concerns. Sound. In 40 years, we have watched sunsets from my front step. With this going in, my grandkids won't see those same sunsets. 40 years ago, we moved into that house, and I grew up there. My kids have grown up there. I'm still raising my kids there, and my grandkids are there on a regular basis, and they also enjoy the surrounding community and the quiet and the multitude of deer and wildlife that we see. So if we could maybe discuss with the developer at some point my other concerns. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else? You're the developer. I'm going to give you a chance after we close the public hearing, or the applicant, I should say. Sorry. Is there anyone else who would like to make public comment? I know sometimes people are a little shy, so we'll give it just a minute. Well, a few seconds. And then otherwise, I will make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, and then, sir, if you, as the applicant, would like to come up to the podium, you can have an opportunity.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yep.
Members of the commission. I'm Brandon Champo, Executive Vice President with Hempel Development. My address 201 Balsam Lane, Plymouth, Minnesota. First off, I just want to thank everybody, thank city staff. We've been working on this project for over a year and are excited to finally get to this point. I'll address some of the initial, or some of the concerns that were brought up here, but just want to make a couple opening comments. Kendra obviously explained the project well. We've tried to do our best with this project to minimize impacts to the environment. There's a lot of wetlands on the site. We're impacting 0.38 acres out of 20 plus wetlands. We are doing our best to address noise, view corridors, the light pollution through heavy landscaping around the site, through buffers that are, I think, more than twice the city standard. This is a 78 acre site. We're really developing on about 34 total acres of it. So the majority of the site will continue to stay in its kind of natural state. We have also done our best with the city's Northeast design standards here to meet and exceed those standards with high quality building design, again with the landscaping. Traffic improvements, I know traffic is a concern obviously with us bringing more employees and trucks to this area, but this project will be carrying the installation of turn lane off of Highway 101, the 2 new public roads, which are about $2 million of investment. The public, or the area-wide charges that we're paying as part of the project are about $3.5 million. So there's about $6 million that this project is carrying just in what I would consider kind of public improvements or public infrastructure upgrades. The trail connection, the sidewalks that we'll also be installing. A couple other things, the types of companies and businesses that this type of project will attract, we think are exciting for the city of Corcoran, hopefully to potentially grow existing Corcoran businesses or businesses that are want to relocate and make Corcoran their home. This type of building, a Class A industrial building, will attract high quality employers. We expect probably 500 to 700 employees will be here at any given time. And then obviously once the buildings are up, the tax base that these buildings will generate based on what tax rates are for existing industrial right now will probably be $1.5 to $2 million annually to the city. I know not all that goes to the city, but a significant amount of new taxes that will hopefully go to serve other parts of the city as well. Obviously, we're here to seek your approval. We appreciate working with the city and the staff over the last year. I'm happy to address the specific kind of comments right now.
If you'd like to, in particular the noise and those concerns, that'd be great.
Yep. So a couple things. I'll just maybe start with traffic, because I know that was a concern. We can't really dictate where the trucks will come in and out of the site because it's 2 public roads. To your point, some trucks will come in on the north side, some will come in on the south side. Where they decide to leave the site will be up to them, but with 2 public roads, it's hard for us to really restrict that access. But we do, just for safety purposes, obviously the truck court of these buildings is self-contained between the 2 buildings, because we don't like to mix truck traffic with our employees, and so we try to keep all the truck traffic, or will be keeping all the truck traffic to the interior of the site. And then from a noise perspective, Kendra brought up the landscape berms. We've been very selective in kind of where we place enhanced landscaping, whether it's raising the berm to 8 feet, installing trees that will hopefully do a better job of blocking noise and light from those areas. And then from a light pollution perspective, all the lights on our site will be LED. They're designed to basically restrict the spillage of the light from outside of the light bulb. The technical term, full cut full cutoff LED lights. Will be, so hopefully, nobody really sees lighting unless you're really standing underneath it. And I think there's a lot of examples around this, like this, we drive down highways now, and you see a light kind of in distance, but you don't really feel the light until you're actually under it. So all the lighting in our site will be full cutoff LEDs. Again, as far as how we address noise, it's through the buffer, the significant buffers on all sides of the site, the landscaping, containing the truck traffic between the two buildings. The buildings themselves essentially act as a noise buffer to the surrounding area. And obviously there's noise ordinances that are just at a state requirement that all of our tenants will be required to comply with as well. And if they're not complying with that, then somebody at the city's going to hear about it, and our tenants will eventually hear about that as well. So I don't know if that fully addresses the concerns you guys have. I mean, we're doing everything we possibly can, obviously, to mitigate any impacts around the site, and trying to keep everything as contained as possible within the 34 acres that we're developing.
Thank you. And if you'll remain available, then as you guys have any specific questions, we can call you back up to the podium if that's acceptable. Okay, thank you so much. So at this point in time, we will go ahead and begin any sort of discussion or recommendation or what have you regarding what you guys have for the commission.
I can kick off. I had a question around the specific concern cited in the public safety plan around accommodating a fire truck and the space between the two buildings. And maybe I don't know if staff should answer this one or the applicant, but I'm curious how you possibly accommodate for that other than changing the plan, or what the thoughts are there.
The public safety had a couple of comments. One was to provide turning radiuses, I'm getting to the memo here, to ensure that we have adequate turning radiuses. I think we do. The
Okay.
applicant needs to dimension those, but the second
Was the ladder trucks within 30 feet of the building?
right. So if you couple of things. There is enough space between the parking of the trailers in that center space and the back of the building that a ladder truck can get in there. It's not a multi-story building, so bringing a ladder truck in, again, we are very conservative about our public safety needs, but I feel confident that the public safety conditions will be met, and it's a matter of dimensioning some things on the plans.
Thank you. That's all I have right now.
A question that I have for the city is just regarding the request for the no jake breaking. I know that was sort of just a request between two business owners, but I have seen in areas where there's like a sign put up. Is that possible?
I believe we'd have to update our code, and
Were you here when Nelson came in?
no, I wasn't.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
And
Or is
our
there just
liaison
something else
left.
that regulates that
So
already?
the police chief, we can maybe have him add this to the memo. We did evaluate this, and we did not make that a condition. It was discussed as part of that, and there were the police chief did not recommend that for a variety of reasons.
Oh, okay.
And I'm trying to recall the specifics, but I think we can follow up and bring that to the council. There was an issue with why we did not end up signing that stretch for no jake break or changing our code. And I don't recall, because I do recall the comment being brought up with Nelson, and then I recall the police chief bringing that to the council, and I can't remember the reason why. So I just made a note that we will
Look into
be
it.
prepared to bring that update when this goes to council.
Appreciate that, thank you. And then I had a question, and this I guess is up to the county, but that northern street that will be new, that it says will eventually connect with a Maple Grove, that I'm assuming will have a turn lane off of 101, but right now, all of our turn lanes that are being added are not those, and I'm not gonna get the proper name for the term right, but you know where you've got like you can turn left or you can turn right from the center lane.
Yeah.
But that seems to be the popular way to go but only when you have some place that you can go left and right? So initially, when it gets put in, if there's only this building to the left, will they just then be responsible if eventually it connects to that right street of making it a left or, do you know what I'm saying? That center turn?
Yeah, our feasibility study said they need to build a right turn lane.
Okay,
Again, Hennepin County is the permitting agency. They have to review the location of the curb cut and any conditions. And
Okay.
so, in some circumstances, we've worked with the county and our neighbors in Maple Grove, and there are some limits to prohibit left turn lanes. We don't expect that to be here, but I don't know that the current feasibility study did not require them to do the left turn lane at this.
okay. I'm just thinking, because north of this is where that roundabout with access to 610 is. And so the idea that more would be going right and then down seems less likely than turning left out of this property, but I don't work for the county, so we'll leave that up to them. And then Eagle's Nest that had been identified on the property, I'm assuming that even though we don't have a tree preservation clause as a city, there are some federal regulations around preserving. So can you just address that
Yeah.
quickly? Thanks.
Thanks. The EAW I mentioned had a number of mitigation strategies included as part of that, and there's a condition in the resolution that they comply with all of those. And one of them includes the animals, including the eagle's nest, but there were some other protected species. I'm like Natalie,
It's
I'm
late,
losing
it's
my
fine.
words. Some endangered, some protected species. So for example, Blanding's turtles, there's some tools that we need to incorporate into the plan. I think there was a skink or something on here that we need to incorporate some protections for. There were a couple of animals that specifically are called out in the EAW with specific mitigation strategies. And that eagle's nest, while it's far from the construction zone, is one of them and does have strategies for protection.
Perfect. And then the only thing that I wanted to state, because I meant to state it just as a matter of piece of education, I meant to say it during the quick trip, but is that what has come up more than once as new development gets put in with landscaping is the size of the trunk of the tree when it's put in. And we considered at one point in time changing the requirement to a larger trunk size, and we were just told by all of the landscape owners in that's just not feasible for the state of Minnesota. So that's why that tree size, the trunk, is not larger when it gets put in. It'd be awesome if you could get a full-grown mature tree to take in an area, but so all that to say, I wish that we could, that you wouldn't have to wait quite as long for some of the screening to grow in. But unfortunately, if we want that landscaping to be successful, we have to take the recommendation of those experts on the size of the tree put in. That's all I have. Do you guys have any questions or discussion?
I think they've done a really nice job on this one. We talked about this one.
Last
you know,
month.
Yeah, with the amendment that we did, but, yeah, it came up, and I like the way you shared that center. I like the way you've got the freight moving inside between the two buildings where it's, more muffled sound and everything, and it actually, we were concerned because I think some of the medians had to come out of there to allow that turning radius for the big trucks, but it ended up being less overall in impervious pavement. So I think this has been done really thoughtfully. I think the Eagles will be okay. I mean, if that Eagle's Nest on Highway 55 can handle all that construction. That eagle was out there watching that construction for Adams Pest Control of all places. But yeah, I saw both of them there on the nest just the other day too. So they're doing well.
One quick question that when you mentioned the truck bay area in the center, so it does sound like this is staggered, right? So building one is gonna go in first, and then you do indicate that market conditions that's what building two is connected to. Totally understand. Where does that leave that shared truck bay? Because obviously until that second building goes in, the truck base is, it's not shielded by that second building. Yeah, please.
Yeah, it's a great question. We're still evaluating to what extent we'll put the next truck court in. If I had a guess, it'll be just shortly past the property one or the lot one property line. Sometimes we'll install it all the way up to the building just to speed up the construction of that next building. But I think just to maintain some flexibility potentially if, you know, if the second building user turn 2 buildings or something like that, just to keep that flexibility, we'll probably minimize that construction to just what building 1 needs.
Okay, thank you.
The only other thing I wanted to say, real quick, sorry, Peter. I'm glad to hear that Nelson International is a good neighbor for you guys at the campground too, and it seems like a very similar development here. And the amount of screening that you've got around the edges, I mean, it'll take a little time to grow, but I think that's really excellent. Thanks.
You know, Kendra, you know, the last time we met, we talked about the ends of a facility. This is the kind of ends I like, where you bring up the berms, and so that was, I applaud you for that. That's really quite nicely done. Do we need 393 stalls? Do we really need all that parking?
Wow, he said 500 to 700 employees,
Huh?
possibly? 500 to 700 employees?
You know,
I kind of question
I'm always
it
gonna
too,
go
but-
for green
Yeah,
space, so that's
yeah.
why I bring it up.
Yeah, it is a good question. I had the
So-
same question. Then he told me.
So
nobody-
I'm just gonna bring that up. The other question I have, is this, when you build the first building, are you bringing in fill to, because I noticed on the plans that there's a 20-foot difference between the finished floor and Brockton.
Yep.
And so when you look at Brockton, standing out on the north side of that building, and then you look at the building, it's 20 feet higher just by the floor, and then it's gonna be another up to 45 feet. So that's a significant elevation that's being exposed on the east side and the north side.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's okay, I'm done with my statement.
The crazy thing, a site this large, we're actually about even in our cut and fill. So on the south side of the site, I don't know if the exhibit was provided with the drawings that we submitted. We do have a cut fill exhibit that I can share.
I didn't see it.
But it's, the south side of the site is long, so it's higher, so we'll be pushing a lot of that third, north to obviously accommodate that, change. And then where there's ponds, there's excavation in those pond areas, so we'll pull that out. But I believe we're like 8,000 cubic yards off.
Oh.
It sounds like a lot, but it's not for a site of this size.
So, okay, so that's all, most of the fill is coming from
From the
on-site?
site itself, yeah.
Okay, so we're not gonna have a lot of truck traffic coming down 101
Right.
into the building, okay. Okay. Do you have, are there building lights? Are there building lights on the building, or is it just,
Yeah, there's typically, I don't know, I think there's some standard for that, but like walls, phone lights or whatever, we'll install near the entrances.
okay. So the other comment I had is, I know I was at the town council meeting, what was it, last week? And person Nichols was talking about precast and what was allowed in this district. And is this, it seemed to suggest, he seemed to suggest that the smooth face precast is something that would not be desirable in this area. Is that true?
He didn't want to see it in the business park district.
Okay.
I think he wanted a slightly higher quality. I think he preferred the brick precast. in
Yeah,
that
thin
area.
brick.
Yeah, so for the industrial, light industrial, he was okay with they voted to change it to allow for the smooth concrete.
For the smooth, okay.
Yeah.
And I think it's important because there has been some concern in creating distinction between the two districts as well, so
Okay.
I feel like this is one.
Are we, is the city comfortable with the fact that this building is painted? I don't believe the color is not integral with the precast, correct?
Correct, right.
So it's painted.
Madam Chair, that's very typical in these industrial applications. We do feel like the painted precast is a durable product and consistent with the intent of an industrial district like this. So,
Okay.
yes.
this is a big building. It's 1,100, more than 1,100 feet long, and from my calculations, only using the graphic scale, it's 160 feet wide. Again, my concerns are obviously the lighting, if there's anything that we can do to ameliorate the light pollution, specifically to the people who live east of the facility. If there's anything that we could do, to me, that would be great. And then also, I looked at the facade, and I'm not real happy with the facade, and I think you can, first of all, I think the requirement of the spacing, I think right now, from my crude measuring using the graphic scale is at 120 feet, and I believe it needs to be 80 feet.
And that's a condition of approval,
Okay.
is that it would be that 80 feet.
Okay, good, but I would like to see a little bit more articulation on that facade and a little bit more variety. It's just, it's just one big mass. And anything you can do to begin to break that mass down, by adding more, not overhangs per se, but light shades, just to begin to provide shadow on that facade, to begin to articulate it, as well as, instead of having all, I don't want to design your building for you, but I'm just going to pass along my thoughts. But if there's a way that you could vary the entrances so they're not all the same thing, and perhaps not all the same color, that you introduce different colors or something different, just to help break up that mass.
I think we could certainly look at, the other kind of accent material that we have is this metal paneling. We could look at adding some more metal paneling around those secondary entrances, those interior entrances. Certainly happy to look at since it's a painted building, we can certainly articulate other areas with different colored paint too.
Yeah, and I do recall that they were also talking about fall windows, and I don't know how that plays into this. The last town council meeting, again, I think it was Councilperson Nichols was talking about.
I think you may be talking about the commercial and industrial update discussion about our commercial and industrial standards for the city overall. So there was a desire to have some kind of window or glass component added as a required building material. That has not been adopted yet. That is part of the update that's coming. So this proposal wouldn't be subject to that. But I think just so that you're aware that it has been stated as a desire of the city council, so that could also be something to incorporate.
But we could ask for it, couldn't we, as a condition of approval?
Well, technically,
Not
if,
with this one.
yeah, because if they meet the standards with their proposal, my understanding is we cannot require as a condition of approval additional standards.
We can ask for it, but we can't have it as a stipulation of
Okay,
approval.
well, I'm gonna ask for it.
Yeah.
And the request is just for more glass, is that?
Just, again, it's really the composition of the facade. It's the form, the color, the articulation. I think you could improve upon it.
So I will say it's not reflected in these plans, but we just got our updated construction pricing this week, and I have instructed our design team to add, I believe, 30 more windows to the east elevation of building one. Just to bring more light into the warehouse primarily. So we will be adding more windows to this facade already. I don't know if it'll meet.
Perfect, yep.
But,
Glass is always good.
yeah.
And I think that really is the extent of my comments.
Do you have anything you want to circle back on, Commissioner Wynn? Okay, is there anyone who feels like they are in a position that they are ready to make a motion? Otherwise,
Yeah, I just want to also say, this proposal seems super complete. There were, it is great to see the berms. I love the berms. The diagrams to see the different viewpoints are really, really helpful. So thank you for that work that you did to put that in and help us and the citizens to see that. So I'll make a recommendation to approve
and will you,
the
that you are recommending the approval of?
preliminary plat and site plan.
And I will second that motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, and so that's a recommendation for approval that will go to the council.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks.
And how are we doing? Checking in. All right, chugging along? Okay, we're going to item number 3, or item C on the new business agenda, which is the Chastic Family Farm preliminary plat and rezoning, which is City File 25-001, and we're gonna begin with a staff report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is our third public hearing for tonight. The applicant is Trek Real Estate and Development with Temple Real Estate, doing business as Emerald Rose LLC. They are proposing a 104 single-family residential development with 3 outlots. And this is for the property at 7600 Maple Hill Road, so it is northeast of the Maple Hill Road and County Road 10 intersection. So it has 2 components again. There's a rezoning and then there's a preliminary plat. So right now the site is zoned RSF2, and they are requesting to rezone it as RSF3. RSF3 is meant to be the primary single-family residential district within our MUSA area. So the MUSA is where we have planned utilities, or city utilities. So there are a number of criteria outlined for when we consider a rezoning, and that is outlined in the staff report. Ultimately, staff finds there is reasoning to support the rezoning request. One of the primary being that the RSF2 district really is not going to allow them on this site to hit that 3 units an acre. What they are proposing right now is 3.04 units an acre roughly, give or take. So even the loss of, I would say more than 1 lot, we are starting to get below that 3 units an acre that you need to hit per the land use guidance of our comprehensive plan. So I would say just with that alone, that does support re-guiding or rezoning this property to RSF3 to allow for a slightly reduced lot size and lot width so that we can hit the 104 units. But that is a policy choice of the city where there is a high degree of discretion. And so that would be an area that we would need Planning Commission's feedback tonight. Assuming that there is support for the rezoning, the preliminary plat proposed has 104 single-family lots with the lot size ranging from about 7,800 square feet to 28,000 square feet, where the minimum lot area is 7,500 square feet. All lots comply with the minimum lot width of 65 feet, and then all building pad locations comply with the setback requirements. All homes must comply with the design construction standards that are in all of our MUSA single-family districts. And so they have submitted example elevations that look to comply. Some more information is needed on some of the minimum dimensions and the percentage of the garage, but overall they look to be able to comply, and that would be reviewed as part of the building permit. There are 4 full accesses proposed to the development, into the development. So there's 2 on the west side and there's 2 on the east side going into the approved Fairway Shores development to the east. We'll get a little bit more into the four access points though. For landscaping and wetlands, there are a number of wetlands on the site. A couple will be impacted, or there may be an extent where they're impacted, and then the wetlands that are remaining will require buffers. And then the landscaping plan does comply with the exception of that we need to address the buffer yard class A. Specifically, there was a couple of areas of inconsistency with the width proposed and the plantings proposed, and then the northern boundary also needed to include, the northern boundary with the exception piece right here also needed to include some plantings. And the applicant did already submit a revised landscaping plan today that I think addresses that, so she's on top of it. So overall, though, they are complying with the minimum landscaping standards, and we'll work through that buffer. As far as the streets and access, again, we have 4 full access into the development currently shown. However, the northern connection onto Maple Hill Road does not comply with the road network spacing showing in our Southeast District Plan and creates a conflict with the two driveways to the church, existing driveways to the church over to the west. So staff recommendation continues to be that that northern access be closed and it either needs to be a cul-de-sac is preferred. It can be any other city standard turnaround, such as a hammerhead, and then still requiring a emergency access into the site to allow for that emergency services concern to be addressed. But there is concerns that the current spacing will create a public safety hazard as well. So that is a condition of approval, that it be revised to either a cul-de-sac or other city standard turnaround. The project will require improvements. County Road 10, there will be a required dedicated right lane and an eastbound left lane, turn lane, I should say, I apologize. And then Maple Hill Road will also need to be improved up to the northernmost access. That is discussed in the feasibility study that was completed, and it was initially completed with the previous proposal, and then it was updated with this proposal, and that condition does remain.
I don't mean to interrupt your staff report, but can you clarify, is it to the northernmost property line or the northernmost access?
Northernmost access.
So if that secondary access becomes a cul-de-sac, does that change?
It does, so I believe we looked at this before with the last one, so I believe that the emergency access might still require some improvement.
Okay.
It might be that it's a slightly different extent.
Okay, sorry, continue, please, sorry.
So that'll be something that we continue to work through with our engineering team.
Okay.
So for the trails, the 2040 comprehensive plan does identify a proposed trail that would connect to the Fairway Shores development to the east, and it goes all the way to Maple Hill Road. However, the site constraints with the current proposal does not allow for a continuous trail experience throughout the site. It's interrupted. It ends up kind of wrapping around this wetland, going to the sidewalk to wrap around. Here, let me get my pointer, I apologize. Right here is Maple Hill. They're proposing the trail alignment along here. It has to come down to the sidewalk because of the wetland, and our public works director does not want to deal with another boardwalk. And and I think the sentiment is shared amongst staff and council. But then it goes back again around the homes, and then comes back because of the wetland stormwater pond over here. We looked at trying to fit it through the wetland and stormwater pond, and there's just not enough space to comply with our other setbacks. So it goes back to the sidewalk. Taking a look at this, staff's very concerned about the fact that it's pretty interrupted, and so what is the likelihood of that actually being used? I think most people are just going to end up using the sidewalk. An alternative would be to have an on-road trail, but again, our public works team is very concerned about a trail where there's so many proposed driveways and where that intersection would be. Mm-hmm. So at this time, staff recommends removing the trail, not taking a trail easement for this project, just focusing on the sidewalk that is proposed. And the Parks and Trails Commission did agree with that recommendation as well when they reviewed it. So we are departing from our comprehensive plan. It doesn't seem to make sense with the site design. And then park dedication would be taken entirely cash in lieu of land. So those are the big components. It's actually pretty straightforward. They're not asking for any variances. They've done a lot of work to have this comply with our RSF3 standards. So staff does recommend they open the public hearing and take testimony. We did receive one public comment. I believe it was just the one public comment that we received. And then, so that should be considered as it was read or as spoken. And then staff recommends approval of the draft resolutions of approving the rezoning to RSF3 and approving the preliminary plat. I'm sorry, it's a draft ordinance approving the rezoning with a draft resolution with findings of fact, and then a draft resolution approving the preliminary plat.
So 2 resolutions.
2 resolutions and 1 ordinance, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you, Natalie. Okay, at this point in time, we did receive a comment that was included in the packet, so you guys have all had a chance to review that. And then now we're going to go ahead and give anyone who's here the opportunity to speak on this item. So if you are here to give public comment for the Chastic Family Farm preliminary plat and rezoning, you are invited to come up to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and just try to keep your comments limited to 5 minutes, please. Is there anyone who's here and would like to make a comment? All right, no one is jumping the gun, so I am gonna go ahead and make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, and I'm actually gonna begin the commission discussion and recommendation. I don't usually do that, but I remember this from May of 2024. And so what I wanted to indicate, just for those who maybe haven't been here, is that this, this actually has fewer homes than is what came to us a year ago. So I just wanted to point out a few of the things, because I know when we see rezoning to RSF 3, it can cause your heart to like pitter patter and have some quick palpitations. So I looked up the numbers and went back and reviewed. So I just want to say them and have them out there just for you guys to know. So what's being proposed right now is 104 single-family homes. What was included a year ago, not that it has a bearing on this, but it just gives some history, was 116 single-family homes with 7 outlets. At that time, it was also requested to be rezoned to RSF 3 for the lot width minimum, not to actually have townhomes built in the area. And at that time, there was actually, it was done as a PUD, so there was a request to have a 60% maximum garage frontage, whereas what's being proposed right now is 55%. So I just wanted to tell you where we were at with some of that. And now tonight, instead of coming as a PUD, it's just coming as a rezoning request with the preliminary plat. So with that in mind, who would like to begin their discussion or raise any questions that they have?
Go ahead.
Go for it, Commissioner Kozicki.
The upper left corner, lot 10, if that street is turned into a cul-de-sac, it couldn't go south. It couldn't be a centered on the road cul-de-sac. It would probably have to be a circle that kind of goes up halfway into that lot 10, and you wouldn't have that lot 10 anymore as a house. But it would probably only take up half of that lot if you were gonna put a cul-de-sac in there.
Yeah, cul-de-sac or a hammerhead would have to go there,
Yeah,
so it's likely that they would lose that lot.
Yeah, but they wouldn't lose all of it, so then what happens with the other portion of it?
Would get absorbed into the outlot,
Okay, it just become an outlaw.
or it could get absorbed into one of the neighboring lots too, so they could, yeah.
So it also said there's no specific builder. Concept elevations provided with the application are from M&I Homes. Do any of these subdivisions ever just sell individual lots and let people come in with their own builders so that you don't have, Kendra made a face at that.
Theoretically, however, typically it gets sold to a single builder. I think it allows for more economic construction of the site. But I think sometimes in our rural, they could do that, but I also would say that we're seeing subdivisions where it's a builder that's coming in and doing the subdivision so that they can sell, but they are custom-made lots or custom-made built homes, so there's a little bit more per the actual property owner.
I guess my main question regarding that is just, most of these subdivisions, they look very generic. Most of the houses look kind of alike, so you don't have a lot of variety in housing. And I don't know if there's a way to get more variety in housing. Was it this neighborhood that we'd talked about before, and they were talking about even colors of homes, like couldn't have the same color as the house on the other side or something?
Yeah, so that's all in our basic architectural standards for the district to try to, there are non-monotony clauses, so they would be expected to comply with those standards.
Because I've seen some kind of fairly monotonous neighborhoods. All right, let's see. Question here. The lot that the ghost plat is required for, so that if it develops in the future, it's the existing home on the property. That one's gonna continue to have access from Maple Hill Road, the same as always, correct?
Yeah, I believe at this time, there's not a requirement that that lot be served by the new public road, but we do want to post plat showing how that could be served in the future.
My other question is, it says here on page 15, there appear to be multiple driveways that will need to be increased in length by at least 2 feet so that you can have that parking space. Is that an issue with this?
It would have to potentially reduce the building pad size that they're showing, or shift things a little bit to the south. They could theoretically, the outlot, they could extend the property line to the back of the outlot all the way, and I'm talking about this northwest corner. And then they should still be able to comply. But there's a couple of strategies they can do to get that 2 feet, but yes, they do need 22-foot long driveways as a minimum.
Okay. And the only other thing I noticed in here, I think it was in appendix C that's showing the houses.
And I think that's what they were referring to as like they haven't committed with this buyer, but those are examples of what could be built.
Yeah, there was one in there that had a larger garage facade than, but not a big deal at this point, I take it.
Yeah, so every building permit would essentially that would all be reviewed on an individual basis as they come in, and they'd have to provide dimensions of the garage structure as compared to the rest of the facade.
And if there was anything that was requesting a variance from the standard, then they would have to come back and ask for a variance. So otherwise, we wouldn't see it again.
Okay, all right, that's all I had.
Do you want to go or you want me to go?
Oh,
Okay.
somebody go, because
I
it's
think
10 o'clock.
I think I've asked you this question before. In what world can this property, okay, I'll just reiterate, this is a policy decision. So I understand your point about the prior application and how it's better, but this, I'm just gonna look at it the way it is, right? RSF, staying RSF2 and developing it. What I'm reading is, it's not possible, because it needs to be at 3 acres, 3 units an acre. Is that a true statement?
I would say what's in front of us is a pretty convincing argument that RSF2 is not going to be possible at 3 units an acre for this site. I don't think that that's necessarily true of all sites, but I think because of the exception piece, because of the drainage on the site, because of where the wetlands are located, that is true of this site.
And the 3 units an acre is required because?
It is guided for low-density residential in our comprehensive plan, and that requires 3 to 5 units an acre.
Okay. Because just looking at this, like, long-term, you have a PUD going into the west. It's gonna be probably a pretty significant development. You have developments to the south. Like this looks like this area is gonna be quite congested. I don't know, if this develops. And so I'm just trying to think about, this policy decision to make it a much more developed area than was maybe intended or guided originally to make a change. I'm just trying to think through that. So I was just sharing that thought with my fellow council or commissioners.
So the property, just to be clear, the property is currently guided for density at 3 to 5 units an acre, and this is coming in at the bottom of that. So they're not proposing changing the guiding, they're proposing changing the zoning so that they can meet the land use guiding. But it was anticipated that roughly at least 103 homes would be on this acreage.
In the comprehensive plan.
Correct. Because in our comprehensive plan, we said this lot would be 3 units an acre at least, 3 to 5.
So is it fair to say that the surrounding properties that are RSF2 will have a similar request?
The surrounding properties, so to the east, they came in as a PUD.
Conservation.
And they were able to re-guide to conservation residential, allowing 2 to 3 units an acre. And they were able to do that because of the preservation efforts they're doing along Cook Lake. The site doesn't have those kind of natural resources, so it doesn't make it eligible for that conservation residential standing as easily. It was discussed with council if they would want to see that, but they weren't really convinced that the drainage on the site made sense to have this acreage move out of the low density residential designation. And then, forgot what sorry.
And
Oh,
then to the west.
To the south, that is Bass Lake Crossing,
Yep.
and that's a PUD, and those lot sizes are smaller than what is proposed here for the most part. So I would say that these are actually fairly large lots compared to what is currently there on the south side.
And I hear what you're saying. I think that the intent of this, since the land to the west is a part of the, what has currently been decided, that downtown area, it makes sense that this is a more densely populated area. I think that we do need to, and especially with the upcoming comprehensive plan, we do need to look at how do we create good transitions from like sort of what someone in the past called legacy neighborhoods, right? Where there are larger lots. How do we transition well from those larger lots to higher density areas? So like I definitely hear what you're saying, and I don't believe that a rezoning would be fit for every area, but for this area where the you have the multi housing units across in Maple Grove across the street, and then you've got Bass Lake Crossings, which is, like she said, the smaller lots. It does feel like sort of a transition to then now you're getting to a larger lot, and then you've got Fairway Shores, which is the largest lot, right? And then you're gonna go across the street to the west, and the intent there is to have multi, what am I saying? Like some of the density of those are gonna be like 8 to 10. And so it seems like in terms of a flow, it would be an area where the concentration was intended. Does that mean though that like we shouldn't begin to look strategically at where are these conservation, densities best served? Like where do we actually have area that we want to conserve in Corcoran? And then also how can we transition better from some lower density to, so that we don't have high density right abutting,
Right.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, I really hear you. But based on the location of this one, I would be in agreement with the rezoning. But you have other things that you would like to?
Well, the only other thing, and you can tell me if this question doesn't make sense, but given the Met Council's recent statements of changing density requirements for outer suburbs, I think we fall in that, correct me if I'm wrong, and thus our plan will maybe change due to that, I don't know, and now we're talking hypotheticals, that 3 units an acre is, we can make decisions on what we have in front of us right now, but I'm just saying these are things I'm thinking about, because in the future, does that 3 units an acre requirement change?
At this time, they're moving forward with average of 3.5 units an acre within the MUSA for our designation of community, our community designation.
Mm-hmm.
So I think to your point, if the more development that we approve at the lower end of the density right now may mean that future development, at least in some areas, we can be strategic about it, might have to come in a little bit higher. However, we do have, a lot of our developments have been coming in on the higher end. And then we're starting to see, I would say, a few that are coming in on the lower end. So we would have to basically redo the math. So that's going to be a part of the 2050 update, looking at that, seeing what credits we have, and then looking at where does strategic density make sense, where does strategic low density make sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's these kinds of things when we make policy decisions that are really important. So that's where I struggle.
Do you guys have some kind of a map that kind of shows the densities? Because it's overall, the 3.5 density designation for our community is like overall in the MUSA area, correct? It's
Yeah.
the overall density. So you might have some that are, 10 per acre. There might be some that are 2.5 per acre, but it's the overall.
Yeah, it's overall within the MUSA, it would have to be 3.5, yeah. So, yeah, that's our land use map, to some extent shows that, it's not, it shows the different land use designations, it goes tandem with the verbiage in our comprehensive plan, land use chapter about what is expected for each land use category. But yeah, I think for the application in front of us tonight, the land today is currently guided 3 to 5 units per acre. And it is coming in at 3.04 under RSF 3 zoning standards.
Which is pretty much the same houses as if they didn't rezone it, but they're doing it just.
I think if they
because
don't
have
rezone
to.
it, they're not gonna be able to hit the 3 units an acre.
Especially if they have to
Yeah.
take off that one lot for the cul-de-sac or whatever.
Correct.
I am wondering if it becomes a cul-de-sac, the northern entrance, would that just ultimately be the ghost plat? Wouldn't that serve as the ghost plat for access to the individual property that,
Yeah, I
do
think
you know what I'm
it's,
saying? I mean,
yeah,
that's
I think-
ultimately
I
their
think it's-
decision, but,
yeah, I think it's just showing the driveway.
because the goal would
connection.
not be to keep or maintain a cul-de-sac in the future if that land to the south were to, do you know what I'm saying, to develop.
So if the land to the south were to redevelop, they're not going to have a driveway out onto Maple Hill Road. So they
Right.
would need to have, so basically
So
the
then
post
that-
plat showing it being redeveloped so that access is coming from that local roadway.
Okay. Okay, that, yeah. And then I guess my question would be, what does the timing look like for road improvements on Maple Hill? Like, do you typically do like all the construction and then at the end you're gonna go ahead? And I mean, that makes sense to me, right? Then improve Maple Hill, so that you don't have all of this construction traffic going back and forth on a brand new updated road. But that's ultimately individual choice?
Well, I think it's more of what the phase comes in, what requirements will be triggered, so
It is a two-phase.
It is a two-phase, at this point, they're proposing two-phase, that can change, but right now what they're showing is a two-phase development. So there will
Okay.
be likely certain thresholds of when each improvement will be required, and so it might be that engineering would ultimately have the final say, so it might be that they don't do necessarily all the improvements with the first phase, but then the second phase, they would have to do all the
Okay.
remaining improvements.
And then I know that this was an issue a year ago, was the question regarding Fur Lane being a construction access, or a construction road, because it didn't, right, so, do you know what I'm saying? And it is getting late, but if Fur Lane right now stops, because that's the edge of Bass Lake Crossings, and Fairway Shores has not started construction, or have they, okay, so then,
They have not started construction, their final plat application has been submitted.
okay, and so, right, so this would all depend on timing, what ultimately, so we can't answer, yes, Fur Lane is going to be available for construction traffic or not.
Yeah, I believe that we've handled it as conditions of approval that they may, but I would say at this point, the first phase of Fairway Shores has come in for a final plat review, and they're a bit ahead of this one, so those questions would be answered by the
Okay.
time this gets to a final plat, I anticipate.
Okay, and then I'm in agreement with the trail, like it seems just kind of wonky, so, to let it go. And then there was a question about a fence, butting up to the, property to the north, yep. And the recommendation was removal of the fence, if I'm correct?
Let me refresh myself on
Okay.
that. I think it was more if we kept the trail, we wanted the fence to at least be consistent, because at one point, the trail was on the, the fence was on the north side of the
Sure.
trail, and then it switched to be on the south side of the trail, by the houses, so if we were going to continue with the trail, we'd want the fence to at least be consistent. I think the fence needs to remain out of certain easements, I think that was the concern.
Okay.
But a fence could definitely go on the properties, it's just making sure that it's out of any required utility easements beyond the typical drainage and utility perimeter easements that you get.
Okay, and then just two comments for you guys. I would look into, I mean, hopefully you have a different interested builder. Okay, I would highly recommend, seeing where that leads.
Oh, what do you mean by different?
Maybe, not M&I would be my recommendation, but.
Okay.
Well, we don't get to stay on that.
I know we don't. I led with that because I know. But then the other thing is this the rear setback, the 30-foot rear setback, and just how that affects the property, the future property owner's ability to put a shed or any permanent structure at that back, because they just wouldn't have room. So I know they'd have space for a patio off the deck, and I ultimately know you do not sell the houses, but this is a concern, because what if all of a sudden we're selling these properties, now we have people living in these homes, and they have an unmet expectation, they're gonna come to us. And so that is a concern of mine. I know we can't.
Could be put in the HOA document.
Right, that'd be awesome. I mean, not that people read them, but at least you could say.
Yeah, there'll be an agreement that has to get recorded against the properties too that have that limitation, so, and then, yeah, the documentation in the HOA makes sense as well, so. yeah.
Perfect.
I also wanted to express just, the volume of applications with HOAs. I know we've talked about this before too. It's significant, unless I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, we're talking about how this development can serve as a buffer or, no, a transition from the property to the north, from the property to the south. Perhaps finding a way, whether that means no HOA or finding a way to kind of diversify the look and appearance and feel of that community, that would normally be a cookie cutter HOA, might help us with that transition if that's what we're intending to do.
I think the primary.
You have to stand up on that.
I'm sorry. Hello, I'm Ben Prisnick with Hempel Real Estate, one of the applicants. I think the goal of the HOA is to maintain like the wetlands and the different drainage areas. So that was actually a requirement of the city staff.
Oh, okay, I thought I saw in the report it was not said if it's gonna be an HOA or not.
So it wasn't stated by the applicant's narrative whether it was gonna be an HOA, but for them to have stormwater and wetlands and outlots, then that would require an HOA. I will say that working through some stormwater on an unrelated project, they didn't want to do an HOA, they have stormwater on individual lots. It can be really burdensome for the individual lot owners to be responsible of that, which would be the alternative. So it's, in some extent, it's easier to do these maintenance of stormwater ponding and wetlands if there's an HOA that's in charge with coordinating that rather than having it fall on one property owner or a few property owners for the entire development.
Fair enough, maybe the point I'm trying to make still resonates or somehow can be incorporated about how it can maybe look like a diversified community to, rather than homogeneous, to drive that transition from community to the south, from the community to the north, that's all.
Makes sense.
Thanks.
Okay, where are we at, folks? Is anybody ready to, make a motion?
Yeah, I will make a motion to approve the rezoning and preliminary plat to RSF3. I like the hydraulic drain, I like what you guys have done with the drainage. I think the HOA definitely makes sense in this regard. Do we want to put any conditions on that? I think there already are some written in as far as driveway length and things like that, that might still have to be looked at.
Yeah, staff noted a few conditions of approval, and so those are, if you make a recommendation for the resolution as it's written, those would be included.
Okay. All right.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Okay.
You take it. No, it's that.
Okay, so that takes us to our last new business item tonight, which is the Lothar Comprehensive Plan Amendment, City File 25-002. And we're going to begin with the staff report, and we get to hear from Dwight.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess, yeah, item 6D tonight, Lothar Comprehensive Plan Amendment. The request comes to you from Brian and Jackie Lothar, who are requesting approval of a comprehensive plan amendment to re-guide their property from existing residential to conservation residential. The subject address is 10110 County Road 116. The site itself is just a little bit under 10 acres, currently zoned single-family residential, and is currently guided existing residential and is located in the first stage of the 2040 staging plan. The request itself, well, context, the current land use guidance for the property is existing residential. The anticipated density within the existing residential is half a unit per acre, but in this instance, it would not allow for subdivision of the parcel. So the applicants are requesting that the land use be re-guided to conservation residential, which would allow for an anticipated density of 2 to 3 units per acre. This is the lowest density allowed that's not the existing residential land use guidance, so it's the next step up in the residential categories. There isn't a formal plat being submitted with this application right now, so I can't speak too much as to the transportation impacts from the application, but I do want to point out that a requirement of a development of this site would require the installation of a public road through it, and with that installation, that would allow for the driveway for the water treatment facility directly north to be relocated off of County Road 116 and be redirected to the newly installed public road within the development. This was a design contemplation with the facility when it was approved in 2022. The density calculations currently within the MUSA are roughly 3.353 units per acre. If this request were to be approved, the overall density within the MUSA would increase ever so slightly to 3.357 units per acre. So not a huge increase on the overall density within the MUSA, but I want to point that out because a lot of times when we get these conservation residential requests to be re-guided, the density within the MUSA is a serious contemplation, and a lot of times those are going from higher densities down to lower densities, and does impact this overall calculation a lot more than this application does. So I just wanted to highlight that with this request, it actually would, even though it's very small, would increase the density within the MUSA. The comprehensive plan itself is a living document, and the city has a relatively high level of discretion when considering such amendments. So when the city does find evidence that support a change in the plan, it can approve the change. And in the packet, I did highlight some considerations for the commission to consider as the discussion goes on. Namely, has the applicant provided evidence just demonstrating the reason the plan should be changed? Is the change needed to allow reasonable development of the site? And does the requested change have merit beyond the interest of the proponent? And I know the applicant is here, and not to put you on the spot, I believe they'd be willing to speak to some of those a bit further, but some of those questions were considered within their narrative that is included in your report. So at this point, staff recommends that you open the public hearing and take testimony from the public, and we also recommend approval of the draft resolution approving the comprehensive plan amendment as requested.
Thank you. All right, at this point in time, do we have any comment cards?
Madam Chair, we have one comment card from Jason Bartels.
Okay, so we are going to open up the public hearing regarding the Lothar Comprehensive Plan Amendment. And so if you would, Mr. Bartels, if you'd want to come up to the podium, we'll start with you. Just state your name and address for the record.
Jason Bartels, 19795 Hunters Ridge. Good evening, Chair Brumman and attending commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I live on the south side of Hunters Ridge. My wife and I have roughly 400 feet of property that will look directly across the street at the applicant's proposed 22-home development in what is now a farm field. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of several neighbors. We know the city staff is recommending approval, and no disrespect to staff, but obviously we, the residents, are looking at this criteria from a different perspective, that being our own front yards. The criteria outlined in the packet and mentioned by Dwight includes items such as the following. The applicant needs to demonstrate the amendment has merit beyond the interest of the proponent. In the agenda packet, it states that the safety on Highway 116 is the merit for the change. I expect the city could find a way to put a road from the water plant to Hunters Ridge for safety without having to surround it with 22 new homes. Sounds a lot like Quick Trip. You want to take the 116 access away from the water plant, just like the 101 access away from Mama G's for safety. Well, Quick Trip has a new road, looks just fine, it's not surrounded by 22 homes. Natalie called it an internal road network. I don't see why that can't be considered in this situation as well. I've spoken about safety with the intersection of 116 and Hunters Ridge for quite a while now, sharing concerns about Bellwether and Hope Church development traffic created an unsafe intersection. Now traffic from all these new potential properties, the water treatment plant, and even the applicant's property itself will only increase that risk. I mentioned this topic as transportation is a consideration listed in the packet. The applicant states they're proposing a density that respects the neighbors. Well, that sounds great, but when you do the math, the proposed properties that border existing residences average less than a quarter acre each, compared to directly adjacent properties that are between 2 and 10 acres. Longtime corporate residents accustomed to having land, open spaces, and privacy are just lining up to have multiple property owners sandwiched into less than quarter acre lots staring right into their backyards. Perhaps the most interesting line of the applicant's narrative reads as follows: expanding the municipal sewer network helps offset the city's fixed cost. The city's fixed cost. I thought this was a private property applicant for personal development and consideration. I mean, we understand the city built the water tower and the treatment plant in anticipation of new residential usage. Bellwether and the Hope Church development will certainly be providing plenty of that. This proposal needs to stand on its own merit or lack thereof, without consideration for extra water and sewer revenue for the city. It's interesting and the more I think about it, disappointing that there's no plot map included in this. Maybe the applicant will have one later, I don't know. I saw one at the January 23rd council meeting when this was first introduced. If you guys are gonna vote on changing the zoning to see what the applicant wants to do with it, I think it's only fair that you get to see the map of what they actually want to turn this field into. I'm glad to hear lots of conversation about lights and screening. The last map I saw, most all, if not all, the headlights from this development will shine directly into our property when they're leaving. Existing screening requirements will be absolutely necessary and consistently applied across all adjacent properties. The applicant can't do what they want with the existing code in place, so they're asking you to change it. Please hold the applicant accountable for complying with existing code. I respectfully request the commission determine that this rezoning is not in the best interest of Corcoran residents and therefore deny the application for the change. Thank you.
Thank you. Those were all the comment cards that we had, but if there's anyone else who would like to make public comment regarding the Lothar Comprehensive Plan amendment, please state your name and address.
My name's Dave Thompson. I'm at 19780 Hunters Ridge. My wife and I had our custom home built on the lot directly next to the Lothar property, which is to the east, back in 2001, so I've been there for 24 years. I would have never built that house there if I would have known there was going to be a high-density housing complex put in next to me. Matter of fact, my wife passed away 2 years ago. She used to always worry about that. I would tell her, the city would never allow that. It doesn't go with the character of our development. And you spoke about legacy development. That's what we're in, right? A legacy neighborhood. This is all part of a neighborhood, as Jason said, that is, low density. That's what we bought into when we moved in 24 years ago. So it greatly concerns me, especially with my property, and there isn't that preliminary plat that was shown at the council meeting included in this packet. I don't know why, but it was shown to the council, and that had 6 properties backed up against my property that would be overlooking my yard, my house. My sense of privacy would be affected by that. Now, obviously, and I've talked to Brian and Josh. Was it Josh? Yes. Josh. And they said that the developer would put in screening, and I'm sure that the city would require it as well. But how good is that screening going to be? Is it up to, I don't know. But the point is, there isn't a transition like you were talking about, going from our traditional development into a much higher density. Matter of fact, if you look at the Del Webb on the other side, or further to the east, they at least put a holding pond in between the Anderson residence and all the houses that go there. These are going to be lined up right against my property. So I'd like you to take that into consideration. I want to let you know that that is a big concern for me. So Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you guys for sticking with the long meeting tonight, those who are here to make public comment regarding this issue, and the applicant, we appreciate that, so. Is there anyone else who would like to?
Hi, I'm Kathy Dickinson, 19725 Hunters Ridge. I wasn't going to speak tonight, but I've been spending these hours looking at what Corcoran was. When we moved in the late 90s, this representation is so lovely, and we bought on a farmer's field. And I remember our builders saying that they weren't going to, there was one council member that wasn't going to approve his proposal because she only wanted to sell to another farmer. And he had to say, there's no farmer that's waiting to buy this kind of land. So we understand things change, and we have always been so grateful to be there. But I just am concerned about the opportunity, just if there's a piece of land and somebody can benefit from it, just selling it to just keep putting houses on it. We welcome neighbors that have the same requirements when we bought. And if that can be changed that quickly, it concerns me about Corcoran and what it is and what it would turn out to be. Thank you for listening to us.
Thank you. And I keep getting a head shake from the last one. I don't think he's popping up to the podium. Okay, so on that note, we will close the public hearing, or I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
And all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And then we will give the applicant or his developer? You are the applicant. Okay, we'll give you an opportunity to address.
Fantastic. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. My name is Josh McKinney with Measure Group. I'm a consultant for the applicant, which is Brian and Jackie Lother. Just kind of setting the table here, a couple of the residents had mentioned it. We had sought some feedback at a sketch plan review with City Council for this kind of direction and how to best proceed in order to kind of facilitate the Lother's desire and ability to subdivide their property, just as kind of a matter of next steps, just wanting to have an understanding of feedback. So we did provide kind of a sketch plan to council, and the feedback that we received at that point was really, you need to, if you need to subdivide or would like to subdivide, you're trying to do something at the lowest density possible that the Met Council allows. And so that's really what we're talking about tonight is, this idea to re-guide from an existing residential, which wouldn't allow the Lothers to subdivide at all, to the lowest possible density that could still be within the MUSA. I understand, I guess let me just address a couple of the concerns here. Regarding the road to the water plant, and just that could just apparently just cut across the Lother property. If the city would like to purchase the Lother property, I'm sure that Brian and Jackie would entertain that for a road. I'm not sure that that would be the highest and best use for that property, but that is something that's not been on the table and something that was not something that's kind of a matter of feasibility in this case at all, in which case we'd still need some sort of guidance change, in which case we'd still be up here talking about what that would look like. With regards to the comment within the narrative that I prepared regarding city's fixed costs, it's exactly right. The city has invested a significant amount of money in water and sewer for the expansion or the expansion of housing within the MUSA. This development does a small part to help offset those fixed costs in order to install that system. Regarding the no plat map, there is a concept. I'm welcoming you to go to the city council. With our next step, if you guys decide to make a recommendation for approval, would be to be working with the city council at their meeting, and then proceed with preliminary plat and kind of the next step of documents, which would provide so much additional detail on screening, on location of lots, on what our means and methods of kind of mitigating some of the impacts to the neighbors would be. We are not at that point yet, and we're specifically asking for the comp plan amendment, kind of a recommendation of the comp plan amendment before we go spend tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in engineering in order to do so. And so what we're trying to get to tonight is the planning commission, does the planning commission agree with us that we think, you know, changing the guidance to the lowest dense possible residential development that the Met Council allows is a wise decision or not? I guess that's kind of the decision point we're looking for. And then with that, if you've got any feedback on when, you know, what we should be looking at as we bring an application for preliminary plat, to help mitigate some of the concerns of the neighbors, I'd be open to hearing feedback on that as well. But let me first talk about kind of what I've committed to. And if I haven't had a discussion with you, please, I'll give you my card. I would like to. I think I've had a discussion, or at least reached out to some of you, which is when we move forward for preliminary plat, I would welcome feedback in terms of how we can deploy things like screening, grading, even, you know, offering trees or strategic tree placements that might be, you know, exceeding minimum sizes on the existing owner's lots, to try to basically address some of these initial concerns, because I get it. I understand that what we're proposing is not a farm field. It is a housing development, albeit the least dense we possibly could. And so I guess I'm looking for feedback tonight. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them, but that's really kind of what we're talking about tonight.
Great, thank you. And then we'll keep you available as questions come up. But we will, at this point in time, begin discussion. Is there anyone who is really ready to go? I have mixed feelings about this one, and the reason I do, well, I have two reasons, so I'll start. I am worried because the conservation zone, residential, I'm gonna start to mix all of the commission words together, has been used 3 times, am I correct? Two or three?
This would be the third.
Okay, and this is a sliver of our city. And what concerns me is that if we're one off looking at a comprehensive plan amendment, we are not, what are the natural resources that are on this property that make this a conservation worthy zone compared to what is left to be developed in the rest of the city? Not just like in the 2050, but I'm talking like the rest of the, you know what I mean, the rest of the city. Because when you use something too frequently because it just serves a one-off purpose, we're not getting a bird's eye view on where it's best used. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Natalie, but I think the phrase conservation is less geared towards the actual conservation of natural resources and more towards the conservation of like a lower density of the land use, or
Kind of.
It's supposed to be
There's
because,
supposed to be some natural resources.
because you just indicated that we couldn't apply that to Chastic because it didn't have anything.
So there is an existing tree line on the site that they are working to develop around and to retain to the extent possible. So that was the natural resources proposed when we discussed this with City Council.
Okay, so I feel like this has all come about real quickly, separate from a comprehensive plan amendment. And so if we're just saying this tree line counts as something that's worth preserving, but we haven't looked at it as a whole, right? So I guess what I'm saying is doing this outside of the 2050, which we're right on the cusp of, makes me a little uncomfortable. Because I feel like it would maybe be better served to look at the all of the areas, and then also to get a feel for, are we gonna keep, I mean, right now, the Met Council is the one setting these densities, and I know that it is a serious thing we have to consider, but I also know that they are an unelected body who has been 3 times over budget and years over deadlines on projects. And I think that there is an appetite for some serious reform in that area. So again, it just feels like, because this it's changing that comp plan as a one-off. Doing it aside from the big picture is where I'm hesitant right now. I do have significant appreciation for the fact that you are aiming for the lowest density. I think that should be a requirement around some of these legacy neighborhoods, because what we don't want to see, which is what's happening in Maple Grove, is subdivision of all of those larger neighborhoods, and now you have big home next to big home next to big home without the ability to have some of the larger lots. So if we can transition that well, so I do appreciate that we're aiming to go for the lowest possible density. The other reason is when we look at, is it serving someone other than the applicant, I think that we have a little bit of tension between who we're calling the city. And so I can see that the city is saying, they gave us this water, they sold us the land for the water treatment plant, you know, we have all of these residential homes going in, but then when we look at the city as the makeup of the residents, there seems to be a big dichotomy in who is in agreement that this is a benefit and this is not a benefit. And so because this is where we have the most discretion because of the ask, it's not something that is like the previous application we see. That's why I am hesitant in doing this apart from the next comprehensive plan review.
I agree that this one's really hard, because it seems out of place with the surrounding neighborhoods to the east and to the south, but then just right across 116, you've got high density. Can I ask, is the existing home and buildings planning on staying, or is it the whole thing that you want to redevelop into 22 homes?
Right, well, 22 is what we showed on the previous sketch. It's likely going to reduce to 21, just from additional feasibility. The existing home would remain. The barn would be disassembled for use elsewhere within the city. We're having discussions on how that could occur. Just because it is a historic structure, you get a chance to go in, it's really cool. But it's kind of at a point of disrepair with significant costs needed to kind of make that change. So the existing home would remain, the existing garage would remain, and then basically we provide an access or kind of a road kind of snaking through this site up into the water treatment facility.
Would it be on the border, I'm sorry, would it be on the border of your property and the water treatment property?
Sorry, we don't get concept plans, they only go to the council, so.
I'm asking Dwight to just throw up what.
Sorry, we're just
I'll
shooting
just
in
say
the dark.
subject to change
Yeah, it
everyone.
would really be helpful to see.
But what I'd say here, I mean, Madam Chair, one of the things that we're looking at with this is, it's funny that you kind of, the discussion is going towards the 2050 comp plan. We're actually concerned the other way, where, hey, you've got the 2050 comp plan coming up. What's the chance that we're able to maintain as low of a density as what we have right now? And so what we're trying to do is say, hey, if we have this ability to do this and make a change now and get a development going now, we can kind of lock in at a lower density and preserve a little bit better buffer than if we're forced to be at 3.5 units an acre, 3 units an acre, whatever that is. And then I think the thing I would just say is, you know, we're in kind of a weird spot with the way the existing residential guidance works, in that, like, how's Brian supposed, if he wants to subdivide his home, he's stuck. So we're kind of in a spot where, like, if it's not this, what is it? And so I understand your concern. I get it. You're right. I mean, we would love to figure out a way to put less homes on here. I can't. And so this is kind of just the sketch that we presented to city staff and city council. There's going to be some minor revisions to kind of address some of the public works comments regarding some utility routing and whatnot. But this is generally the character we're looking at, and that these lots are, you know, anywhere between, let's call it, it's basically 0.2 acres plus or minus as a minimum. And so I guess I would just say, like, these lots compared to what we were just looking at, some of these other things, like, these are significantly bigger. And probably one of the more significant new subdivisions in terms of lot sizes you'd see in Corcoran. And so I guess my point being, we're trying to kind of be that transition, because we recognize there's townhomes across the street. We recognize that there's going to be some additional development pressure to the south. You know, while yes, I can appreciate Hunter's Ridge developed into 5+ acre lots, we are not afforded that luxury anymore. So we're looking at this and saying, what's the next best thing? and this is what we came up with. And so I guess my question would be is if it's not this, what is it?
I hear you. I'm just ready to fight the it's not possible any
fair,
longer.
yeah.
Because so I guess that's personally where I'm coming. I hear that. It should not be that having a reasonable sized lot in Minnesota, I mean, we're looking at lot sizes, anyway, have family lives in California.
Yeah.
10 years ago, we went out there, and they'd never bring lot sizes like that to Minnesota, and yet here we are. And so whether or not that's right, I appreciate that you're doing it. I guess why at this point, if it's RSF1, why can't that be subdivided? Like, it can be.
Not under existing residential. So, and I'd say that's one area that arguably, when the water treatment plant went through, the ghost platting on there did suggest that future subdivision was contemplated because the long-term access is supposed to come from a local roadway that comes when this property redevelops. So I would say right now, with the current land use guiding as existing residential, they cannot subdivide. It says in there that it's not meant for redevelopment. So they would have to re-guide the property, and to their point, this is the next available, in the continuum of density, this is the next available land use designation.
How do we get to a point where you have zoning that you can't even actually build at?
But we just had this problem in the last application, like, it just doesn't make any sense.
Right, that's a problem. I
It
have a
is.
problem with it.
I have a huge problem with it.
Yeah. Listen,
Well,
I get
it
it.
complies, so just to be clear,
Yeah.
RSF1, that lot complies with the
Right.
RSF1 minimum standards. But in order to subdivide, you
Correct.
can't, you would not be able to do it under the current land use designation.
Correct. But not even if you had, but if I'm understanding correctly, not if you even had development rights because you're in the MUSA.
Correct.
Well, exactly. This
Right.
is an RSF1, so the development rights are irrelevant. That's not, it doesn't apply in the zoning district.
Right, so that, yeah.
So you get our problem at this
So
point.
once
I do, and I'm as frustrated as you are. I
Yeah.
just don't think that saying, okay, this is the only thing we can do is a solution I'm willing to.
And I
So
can
just-
appreciate that,
yeah.
it's just the only option afforded to us. I mean, frankly, our option is to go back and we can, I wanna be super clear, this is not a threat, okay, because it's not. Is like, I don't even know if it's technically legal to not allow subdivision within a MUSA. I mean, I would need an attorney to look at that, but I've never seen that happen before. And so I'm just looking here and like, gosh, I don't have another option for my client in terms of how we can proceed with a subdivision, which is his right as a property owner.
Or he could sell the property and then whoever buys it is obviously gonna subdivide
Right.
it like that.
It's one of the
because
two.
That's why they're buying the property in
That's right.
Corcoran.
Not necessarily,
Yeah.
people still do like to farm around here.
Yeah, I
It's
would
just that we don't
say
have
that's not
access to
true.
land, but, anyway.
But
It's
the-
a
but-
totally
but-
different
but to your
aside.
point, let's just say somebody wanted to buy it for farmland, now it's a sewered lot that's
Can't
farmland.
afford it.
It's not, the
No, can't.
acreage price isn't gonna support farm. So
I mean,
my point,
once the city water and sewer comes
is.
in, I think it's,
Dumb
I
question.
mean, it's gonna happen to the entirety of Corcoran eventually. I mean, even
No,
out where.
because people need to eat, and so we cannot continue to have the
Yeah.
loss of 2,000
But you
acres
know
of
what?
farmland.
The areas in the seven county metro, in the metro area that they're reserving for farmland Corcoran is not included in that. Corcoran is going to be, what do they call it, suburban edge?
So to be
I
clear, our
understand.
MUSA is the suburban edge, so our rural residential is not designated as
But it's
suburban
not,
edge.
but it's not designated as an area that the Met Council wants to preserve as agricultural either. I was just
And-
looking at that today, and those agricultural
And I have
areas.
really strong feelings about that, and we
Yeah.
have the
Yes.
opportunity to say that doesn't work
Yeah,
for me
yeah.
as a citizen of this state, because I would like access to my food without having to rely on an infrastructure, but that is a different aside. I'm just really frustrated with this process.
Yeah,
And I can imagine, I imagine that you guys are, I just don't feel like there's a win in this.
Yeah,
Yep.
I think it's unfortunate, but if you're in the MUSA, unless you want to keep your property and keep it zoned the way it is, sounds like that's the only way you can keep a large lot in the MUSA?
I won't say that comment.
To your point, if residents in the MUSA that want to keep their property. There's nothing that we are doing actively to force them to connect to city sewer and water at this time. That has really been the policy from the city that we don't force. And so we're not trying to force anyone to be put in a position to subdivide, but the people that, it isn't just them, there's other people that would have it's large relatively speaking, so it's not necessarily the 40-acre lot, but we're talking about 10 acres where they would like to subdivide, and to even subdivide into 2, we're talking about having to re-guide, rezone. So it's kind of where we are with that.
That's where my question comes in. In what world can they re-guide or rezone and just have 3 lots matching the character of the properties to the east? Wait, we going, this is the lowest density we can possibly do, your hands are tied, your hands are tied. Why are they tied?
We would
Because
have
this,
to establish a new land use designation that would allow for that density. And then we're talking about a much more drastic departure from our 3 units an acre average, or
Which
3.3.
might not exist.
Can do it, but we still have to hit the overall average. And so there's just a little bit more of an impact when we're talking about 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 versus that. So we'd have to do the math so that there's more of an impact. And I also say because of the infrastructure required, it might not be financially feasible to put in the required local roadway, the required utilities without a certain number of lots. So it's not just there's also a financial component for it to be a viable development.
Get that, but I was gonna say, I think, get that, but 22 homes to 4 homes, multi-million-dollar homes, I don't know. There's a big difference there to me to make that. If we're running into this, and again, this is a high discretion policy decision, so bear with us here while we're trying to figure this out. I think that we may need to look into creating something like that because we're running into this all the time. And people need to have options, but we need to also have something that continues to promote our character of our city that we've heard from residents, that we've had, as our vision this whole time. That's our logo. So, I don't know what, and then there was another point that I can't, based on the report, and I was a little bit confused on the different density, like current state tables. The one that I saw says we're over, if we exclude the southwest boundary, southern boundary, we're over 3.5 today. Is that a true statement?
3.357, isn't it?
No, but if you exclude the southern boundary. So we're over 3.5.
We are within, if you're excluding that southeast district, we're at 3.35 right now.
What was the number that was 3.5 something?
That's what they're going to go to.
So, right?
Oh, am I imagining it?
If we include that southwest area, it's more like 3.10, 3.11.
Okay, so what I just am looking at, again, we've talked about this a couple times, but as we, have multiple proposals we've approved today, our numbers are shifting. And so if I look at the argument for this and the benefit that it's providing for the city and the community, and I agree with you that seems like there's a couple things that are particularly related to the city and this dealing and the broader impact of Hope. The entrance on 116 and removing that, I don't see that as a huge value because the city didn't want to have an entrance on 116. They probably wouldn't have had one, or they would have figured out how to solve that, in my own opinion. Fixed costs, helping with the fixed costs. The city incorporated this plan based on an investment analysis that I don't think it's relevant. And so I don't see an immense amount of immediate value to the community. I obviously see it for the applicant. So that's what I'd like to kind of see and discuss more and understand how we can come to a middle ground here. So that's where I stand. That may have not been an articulate decision, but.
And I understand what you're saying about the concern that if we wait till 2050, this could change the other direction. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I think everybody who lives around there could know. But I don't want to live under the threat that things could get worse and I don't have a say in it.
Yep.
I just feel frustrated with that because eventually at a certain point, if we just keep accepting what is without saying what could be or what can we do differently or what isn't working and then work to change that, like I just, then we might as well just say that the government gets to say whatever they want about what happens to my land, right? I'm feeling like I'm studying the feudal system in England right now with my kids in history, and it's feeling like when the lords walked in and were like, hey, we own all the land and now you get to just farm it and serve us. And so that's, I guess, maybe where I'm feeling really, really frustrated about the fact that I'm being told that there is no other option. That just feels really frustrating. And so even if it is completely like gone a different direction from council, I just feel like this would be a better sound, like, I feel like I could justify or consider this as a part of a larger discussion rather than just specific to this property. And I guess I'm still hung up there, and it is getting late, and so all due respect to everybody's time, unless there's something new that kind of a point someone wants to discuss or bring up, I feel like we should begin to just move in the direction of what our recommendation is going to be. Absolutely. I do not want to, you've waited all night with us, so.
Brian Lothair, 10110 County Road, 116. I'm the applicant for this. The question really that also needs to be part of this discussion is, do I have the right as a property owner to subdivide my property according to the ordinances that exist today as of this moment? Not what the ordinances might be 6 months or 12 months or 24 months or 20 years from now. Do I have the right as a property owner in the city of Corcoran to subdivide my property? And if I do have that right, then what does the existing ordinance say that that density needs to be when I subdivide? That was our approach to this whole process. I know our neighbors feel like this is like the worst thing that could ever happen to them because of 20 or 21 or 22 homes coming. The reason I just didn't sell it to a developer is because I want to preserve my home and I want to preserve some of the integrity and the history of our community. I do have an intention to sell my home, but not until after this decision has been made to have this site developed, because that's how I can preserve or prevent the developer from coming in, just tearing down my home that was built in 1912. So I care about this city, I care about the history of this city, but I do have a right as a property owner to subdivide my property according to the ordinances of the city of Corcoran. And that is what we need to deliberate on tonight and make a recommendation. So thank you.
I guess the question for that would be, is that every property owner is subject to the ordinances of the city, because I cannot just say I have 10 development rights, you know, because I want to subdivide my property. So we've touched on these conversations, right? And so the argument there is that this is, can you address that argument for me, please? I'm sorry.
So the development rights are a little bit different, because the development
Right.
rights is how we control density.
Right, but
So,
I'm saying,
yeah.
he is saying that we're not allowing him to subdivide the property according to city ordinances if we don't approve this comprehensive plan amendment. And I'm saying, if it is in accordance with the city's ordinances, then why is it requiring a comprehensive plan amendment? I guess that's where I'm stuck.
Yeah, so the existing the existing residential land use category does not contemplate further subdivision. So in order for a subdivision to move forward, it would have to be re-guided to a different land use category.
So it is within the current zoning, his property is being used and allowed, right, according to the current standard.
Correct.
So I have a question. If he were to, he wants to subdivide it now because then he can keep it less dense than if he sold it outright, and he can keep his property that he wants to continue living in. If he were to sell it because he's not allowed, we don't let him rezone it, so he sells it, he says, I'm out of here. Then whoever buys this property, do they buy it with the same zoning that he currently has, or does the zoning become the MUSA zoning.
So it is the MUSA zoning right now, so the,
It's
yeah.
RSF.
It would not change
Yeah, RSF one is.
So whoever buys this property then would also have to come to the council and ask for it to be rezoned either as a PU, a
Comprehensive
CUP.
plan amendment, you'd have to.
Well,
Yeah, you'd have to start with the
could he do a
re-guiding.
conditional use permit, the way we've seen some of the other lots developed?
We don't, no, we don't do CUPs for residential development. You'd have to start with re-guiding it for subdivision. That's what the step is re-guiding it.
So in residential, the only option for rezoning is this conservation?
So rezoning is different. So rezoning is the zoning district. So so that would be
Land use
changing,
guidance.
like the last application, the land use designation wasn't up for debate. They were trying to work within the land use designation that we had. And we were rezoning to a district with a slightly smaller lot size. So basically the first layer is the land use designation. And the next layer is a compatible zoning district with what was contemplated for that land use guidance. And then you get into things like the specific site use, like for site plan or subdivision or conditional use permit. So this is like the first, like the basis of all land use decisions for the site are based off of the land use designation.
So he's right now low-density residential.
Which is
Right now, he's
RSF one.
existing residential, yep. RSF one is a
It would be-
compatible zoning district.
It would be the same process that anyone who had a lot on Hunter's Ridge and wanted to subdivide would have to go through.
Yes. Yeah. I think it, don't,
I would say the one difference with this is the rest of the Hunters Ridge neighborhood, I believe, is zoned urban reserve, where this one is RSF one,
Can you pull up the land use?
yeah, I can.
Show us.
Because again, we had to subdivide the property for the water treatment plant, and then we had to, as part of that, consider long-term access, once this property redeveloped. So, let me just pull up oh, you're pulling it up.
would it be fair to say that this landowner, as well as anyone else in Hunter's Ridge,
Oh, he's right here.
knows about these constraints? Or did things change significantly when the music came in? Like,
Things did change when the music came in, yes. So I don't know that there was necessarily door knocking to explain how the music changed. I know that there, as part of the comprehensive plan updates that we do, there is an extensive attempt to do outreach to discuss the land use decisions and any changes in guiding. But as far as this one, I'll just say what's different about this property in particular is the land use guiding is existing residential, but it technically falls within phase one for municipal sewer. So again, that contemplates, I think it was kind of meant as a holding zone to keep it existing residential, to wait for a future subdivision application, but I do believe that we do have a couple different documents suggesting that we expected this property to develop at some point.
I think, don't throw me out of here for saying this, but I think the right thing for our city, for our future, for these cases that will pop up, because this does have maybe a layer of precedence to it, is to perhaps explore another land use designation. Because we can't, to your point, I agree with you. I don't see a world where we know something maybe isn't the right fit and we don't feel good about it, but we have to approve it. But we know we want to meet the, our citizens' desires. I don't feel good with accepting it, and I don't feel good with denying it, and there's got to be a better option, and we've been in this situation a couple times. So
And we've
that's my
tried to
thought.
address it a few different ways. We've talked
It's
about
just not
buffer yard
working.
setbacks for legacy neighborhoods, because we understand that there should be a better way to transition, and yet we feel like our hands are tied. So, I know it's getting late and that some folks have quite a drive, and so I don't want to cut anybody off or keep anybody, but from expressing themselves, but I also just really want to be respectful of the hour, the late hour. So if there is something new that anybody would really want to address, I feel like I've had the chance to say where some of my frustrations lie with this, and my preference to be able to do comprehensive plan amendments as a whole instead of one-offs, but very clearly there was some expectation that the city had, when they purchased the water treatment plant, that maybe was an aside. So I don't know, if anyone has a strong feeling on making a recommendation, otherwise at this point in time,
Can I
just
say one
go
more
for it.
thing here? I mean, just looking at this, and I mean, Hunter's Ridge there, and your properties that are south of that, you're gonna have major change no matter what we decide to do here. I mean, you're right in the
I feel like
middle of a
Hunter's Ridge would probably tell you that
commercial
they've
area.
already had a lot of change.
Yeah.
They have been sandwiched in from
Yeah.
something,
I
so
mean, this whole area of Corcoran has, I mean, it's changed, I've been in Corcoran 37 years now, and it's, you know, it's hardly recognizable when you go through that part of it. It looks like Maple Grove now, you know?
right, and we're not saying that change is bad, but I think.
No, and I mean, I guess from what I understand,